So hello everybody. Today is Scorpio new moon. Yesterday was Samhain. Today is also All Souls Day. Tomorrow is Day of the Dead. And bookending that was a birthday for myself and my partner.
Bella Alvaran, hi, welcome back.
All right, everybody. So today we're going to be doing another edition of our New Earth Quantum Compass. We're still in our own transition zone process, we can say. We released a video yesterday looking at the Star of David, the Christ consciousness, the fusion of the serpent energies, all of which we're going to be looking at again in today's episode of Quantum Compass. And we're going to be putting it into the context of how do we navigate the next couple of weeks, as we normally do, right, Bella?
Yes, so it's a big season, the veil is thinner, and we can feel the energy increasing. And we're going to talk about the Mayan wave spell and the astrology, and even about sidereal astrology, a little bit about how we can connect the two of them.
All right, so welcome back everybody to the New Earth Quantum Compass edition. We are now looping back actually to one of the original wave spells that we first did. We did complete a full Zolkin just a couple of weeks back, and we're now back into another new wave spell of the White Magnetic Mirror. So what does it all mean? We're going to get into our presentation today and hopefully share some illuminating ideas with you about how to navigate the next 2 weeks.
Right. So let's start at the beginning though. So we're going to be reviewing again the glyph for this wave spell, which as you can see here is the white mirror, or also the obsidian knife. So it's all to do with reflection, inner reflection and outer reflection as well. So let's start with the moon cycle. We've been talking about how we started, 13 moons, last July 26th. So we're still in the fourth moon, which is called the self-existent moon of form, which runs from October 18th to November 14th. And it's all about giving form, planning, structures. And the totem is the owl. In the last wave spell, we talked a lot about the owl, but it's about activating that intuition, also very connected to the energy of Scorpio, which is about activating that inner knowing, that intuition, the mystery, understanding the shadows and being able to look at it so we can alchemize all of that.
Right, and as we can see, this self-existing moon of form with the owl is pretty much going to take us up to the end of this wave spell because it's starting tomorrow on the 2nd of November and basically running until the 14th. So this is going to take us up to the end of this particular wave spell, but it is really pertinent. We did share a lot about it in the last episode of a New Earth Quantum Compass, so not necessarily wanting to repeat too much. You can see some of the medicine of the owl that we shared last time out, but really I think the most important thing to take forwards in today's episode, Bella, is the idea that the owl is really a totem spirit that is able to cross the veil very easily, with it being Samhain, or Halloween as it's called here in the US, yesterday on October the 31st and today being November the 1st. We've really been at the point where the veil is the thinnest. And what does that really mean? It means that the astral planes or the other world energies are also very, very present for us. Traditionally, back in the land of the dragons in Cymru and Wales, Samhain is the night that Gwyn ap Neith, the lord of the underworld, rides with the wild hunt, which is a thing in the astral planes. If you want to experience that, you can. However, being here in the US, there's been quite a different energy.
And when we were in Mexico, it was Dia de los Muertos, which is very celebrated, actually, where they put beautiful flowers and they bring offerings to the tombs. And it's an amazing experience to be in Day of the Dead.
Right. So, I mean, all of these energies are all present with us at the moment. Today is also, in some places, All Souls Day, which always traditionally comes after Samhain. And then in Mexico, Day of the Dead is really on the 2nd. So we've got these energies of the ancestors, of the other world. We can often say that the world of the fairies is very present. The world of the elves is very present because the veils are thin. And if you look at the 9 worlds of Yggdrasil in the North tradition, there is Elfenheim, which is really the other world, which is somehow a parallel world that runs alongside this one. It may even be a prototype of a previous Earth that we can still connect. And so these are ideas that we can hold of what is reality in manifest form or in etheric or even astral form. So this is a good time of year to be contemplating these non-physical aspects of ourselves and of reality.
Good. So continuing with the wave spell, we are following the third castle of this Solkin, which is the blue castle of transformation, again with the theme of Scorpio and everything else. And the white mirror, which is all about reflection, would be the second wave spell. Remember, we started the serpent last time, and now we're going into this white wave spell. We can see it here, starting with day 118 and finishing here in the heart of the mystical column of the Solkin with day 130. Number 13 is going to be with the dog. So we're going to end up this wave spell being connected to the heart and the energy of the white dog. And then start the next amazing wave spell, which is the blue monkey, which is all about playfulness, magic, and reconnection to our inner child. So amazing couple of wave spells ahead of us. And notice that they don't have galactic portals, but it's because we're already in the center of the womb space.
Right, and as Bella just said, I was asking Bella about this earlier because I've been looking at the galactic activation portals, otherwise known as gaps, and wondering if every single wave spell had a gap. And actually, there are only two that don't, and we're in the first one, and then the conjoining wave spell that follows on from this will be the only other one. But as Bella said, we're in the central column, the central mystical column. So it's basically all imbued with magic, right?
Yes, pretty much. Good. So for those of you that are following the teachings on what the glyphs look like, here's the white mirror or obsidian knife, and here's the other design. And so what is the white mirror wave spell about? It's all about seeing the reflection on the others and going into an inner reflection so that there is no distorted projection onto others. Every time you see somebody bringing up to you, you want to be able to go inwards and analyze, what is this bringing me? Is this something I still need to resolve? Why am I judging? Why did they call me that? Is it because there is partly of that is true? What is it that I need to reassess? So it's about not getting triggered, even if things are going on outside. And the obsidian knife is what used to be, is still used by many shamanic processes where you cut the cords to anything that is still sucking your energy, whether it's entities or any cords that don't help you anymore, or even if it's to a program or an emotional trauma from the past that you're ready to cut now, because you do the process. You don't just bypass it spiritually, but you go and do the alchemization, and then you're able to cut that cord. This wave spell is also all to do with discernment, but it's inner discernment of what is really true for you. What do you really resonate with? It's also going to take us in the hall of mirrors. That's why the veil is thinner as well, because we need to see what is still deceiving us. What kind of illusions are we still falling for? Is the time to wake up and see what is true, and that resonates in our hearts for ourselves. So it's going to bring more clarity. It's the sword of truth, and it's a very big week, not only here in the States. We know that whatever happens in the States affects the rest of the world. And so we're going to see a lot of truth and a lot of purification. These qualities are also two more qualities that are connected to the white mirror are timelessness and being the spiritual warrior, which is a Zen warrior. You know, it's not about bringing more aggressiveness or bringing any of those lower notes, which we will see when we talk about the astrology. We'll see how Mars and Pluto are in opposition. So we will see a lot of that. And there's where we need to be these spiritual warriors that bring peace into a space, into our family, into the conversations. There will still be some shadow to work with over the next few days, over these 13 days, and it's projecting, blaming the others, judging the others, or self-doubting your intuition. If we're still also attached to any illusions, whether it's to do with politics or education or medicine or banking, whatever it is, to any of the programs, see what the illusions are, because we will all be reviewing our beliefs big time, I think. So part of the transformation for this wave spell is the acceptance of different points of view. I talked about this a lot in chapter 2 of the Navigation Guide to Quantum Consciousness, is how do we transcend polarities? What are the tools that we need so that we can accept different points of view as different perspectives and not only one truth? What else can we do to transform within the next 13 days is do a lot of self-reflection, finish the work of facing any shadow. It's an excellent time to do this now. See the other as our mirror and our escape, because the more that we see that the other person is our opposite, equal and opposite as you call it, the more we realize, it's just another me. It's in La Cage. We are another yourself. Yes.
Right. So you know what? I think you just said something that was right in my mind there, Bella, which is that probably of all of the wave spells, this one is the most in La Cage, because it's I am another you, you are my mirror, which can be challenging sometimes and even incomprehensible. But I think that particularly with the way that this wave spell is shaping up and with the day 2, the day of challenge, the day of polarity being a storm glyph, or as we've already talked about in the year of the storm, that it looks like, as we know in the US, we've got some big things coming up in the horizon, literally in the first few days of this wave spell, that we're all going to have to be holding that mirror up to ourselves and saying, well, how does the macro reflect some aspect of my micro? Which part of me is still in polarity? Which part of me is in division? Because all of that is going to come very, very firmly into the spotlight with what's about to happen here in the United States.
And you know what is amazing about this wave spell is that it's going to show us that we're all connected. Whatever happens on the other side of the world is going to affect us, or whatever we do here affects the other side of the world. So this is the one telling us we're all the same, and whatever you project or bring to the world, that's what we'll see more of. So what are you bringing to this world at this moment?
Right, and with today being a Scorpio new moon, which we'll probably talk a little bit more about briefly in a minute, it's also a day where we can make really, really powerful intentions. And I would suggest that a really nice intention would be to look at what's coming up and understand that the very nature of democracy as we've been given it creates political division, which then normally creates some sort of division at the level of us, the people. Which is perhaps why we're going to have to go through a process of looking at what democracy actually is and whether it actually works for us. These are all much bigger questions and not the scope necessarily of Quantum Compass.
Yeah.
But if we bring it down to day 2 of this particular wave spell, which is the mirror of reflection, which is also the challenge day of the storm, I would suggest that we're going to be confronted quite strongly with how much coherency we're having as the world as our mirror. And are we able to rise above political differences, divisions, political divisions, and say, hey, you know what, maybe we don't agree on this particular issue, but you're still my brother, you're still my sister, and actually at the human level, it's okay to disagree, but let's not make it into something it doesn't need to be. Let's not escalate the energy to something that perhaps can actually be more dangerous. So I think that would be one of my prayers for today anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely an intense wave spell.
Yeah.
As usual, I recommend the questions, the reflective questions, day by day, have a purpose, connected to reflection, inner reflection and outer reflection. What do you want to reflect to the world?
Right. Hopefully not division.
Right. So we are very excited because we've been talking about our new line of research, which is connected to the sidereal astrology and the Serpent constellation. And so we talked a little bit about how Kukulkan is the feather serpent. It's the same as Quetzalcoatl for the Aztecs, but for the Mayans, it's Kukulkan. So what is it that the serpents have as information and wisdom that we can integrate now? And so we're looking into Ophiuchus as one of these, as the 13 hidden constellation that hasn't been included, and there must be a reason for it. So we've been doing a lot of research. It's been quite fun. And so here on the right, you can see the Serpent constellation. This would be the head, and then this is the whole body. And this is supposedly Ophiuchus with his legs here, which is here. You can see him in between Scorpio and Sagittarius. So I think one of the first things that this is asking us to do, because it got activated with the Serpent wave spell, we're presenting it today, is you need to bring back the Serpent wisdom. And we had the wonderful opportunity to talk to Zach last week, and I was able to ask him the question. So what is it we need to bring back? Is it Ophiuchus? Is it the serpent? And he said, is the serpent's constellation that you want to include as the 13th sign? Not so much Ophiuchus, because there is too much discrepancy around Ophiuchus. Some people have believed that it's Asclepius in the Greek mythology, or why should there be a man holding or being the bearer of the snake? Is this about more control? Then there are other mythologies, like the ones from the stellar nations, which think it should be the goddess who is riding the serpent. So because I see there are too many contradictory ideas, I fully agree on that we should just focus on the stars and the whole energy of the serpent, which is more neutral. It's about transcending gender or anything like that.
Right, and of course we did just put out a video yesterday talking a lot more about this activating the grail within. So this quantum compass is also somewhat in parallel to that episode that we put out, an energy update for Samhain yesterday. If you haven't watched that, definitely recommend it. We're not going to be necessarily repeating the material, but we are on a voyage of investigation. Because as we step onto this new Earth timeline, what's been occurring to us as people is that we also want to step out of the old paradigm. We're not the people that we were, the people that have lived the first half of our life doing all of these things. Yes, some part of our essence has those experiences, but on the new Earth timeline, we can dare to dream of being something different. And that's given us the impulse to look at the 13 sign zodiac system, because part of the navigation guide to quantum consciousness, what it taught us was about the missing 13, which is deeply connected to the goddess. So that's the container with which we're exploring this and wanting to share all of it with you. And judging from the feedback that many of you sent us directly or commenting on the YouTube, it's something that's caught your attention too. Yeah. So this is a further invitation to all of you watching this to join us on this journey as we explore the possibility of maybe stepping into a new skin as we shed the skin of the old serpent cells. So lots to contemplate here, and I think in this next few slides, we're going to be looking more at how the energy of the serpent, of the snakes, maybe is something that we've all been a little bit afraid of, maybe even ashamed of, because lots of people have pointed a finger at the snake and said, well, you were there at the Garden of Eden. It was you that tempted Adam and Eve to bite the apple. But as we've been learning, the serpent's natural spiritual energy is ambivalent, a very, very 5D quality, we can say, a very non-dual perspective. So from the serpent point of view, they just offered a choice. Whether you took the choice, we might call it temptation, is really down to you, the individual. Don't blame the snake for giving you the choice.
Yes, and the other big piece of information that Zach gave us is that looking at the sidereal astrology adds another dimension. Right. It's not about completely leaving the tropical or traditional or mainstream astrology. That one is very important too, because it's showing us more of the 3D, and there are so many people connected to that information that we have managed to access a lot of information. But let's remember that the planets are also evolving, and we want to connect to the next dimension, which is the higher octaves of everything that is going on upstairs in the sky.
Right, and as Bella just said, you know, we're not necessarily throwing the baby out with the bathwater and getting rid of one system because it doesn't work. It sort of still does work, and we're going to be, as we've already done, looking at today's new moon in Scorpio, which does make a lot of sense for the energies, particularly here in the northern hemisphere, as the leaves are falling off the trees. It's death and rebirth time, and always around this time of year, which is our time of year as individuals, particularly on my own birthday, is really when I notice the leaves falling much quicker. And once we get beyond Samhain of the 31st of October, we accelerate in the northern hemisphere much more quickly into the darkness, which we can also say is the void, which we can also say in another way is like the emptiness, which is also another aspect of the fifth dimension. So we're pulling in lots of threads here and trying to make it make sense for us, but also understanding that maybe some part of our soul may be reflected differently in the stars than it is down here in the 3D, where we've been using the tropical Western system, which does fit very well with the seasons. There was a point some time ago when the sidereal and the tropical were actually simultaneously conjoined, and as above, so below matched out. But we've now kind of gone off that because of precession, because of the tilt in the earth, and things that we talked about in the last episode. So as Zach advised us, maybe we can use one system for day-to-day mundane activities, and the other one can be more of a transcendence of our astrology, because we're not meant to stay the same as our astrology that we come in with. If we stayed literally as the same blueprint that we were born with, and we die with the same energy still with us. We haven't really evolved enough in our lives, I would say. But what happens when we get to the point that our blueprint feels like it served us? I think that's where we are now.
And the key is our intuition,
Right.
which I think is the main word of the whole show when it comes to Scorpio season, to Ophiuchus, to the serpents. It's all about your intuition, what fits when, and it's something that you will learn to discern once you go more multidimensional. So here we have the Serpents constellation. This would be the head here. It's called Serpent's Caput. Then you follow it here. Here would be Ophiuchus. And then this is the tail, Serpent's Cauda. And I want to draw your attention to this star called Unukalhai, which is called, in the Stellar Nations mythology, is called the heart of the serpent. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. And here I highlighted again the head of the serpent. Here is Unukalhai. And then this would be the rest of it. And that's Ophiuchus there, and the legs of Ophiuchus. This is the tail. So when you look at it, it's not very easy to find the whole serpents constellation when you Google it. They normally separate the head and the tail, or they don't, or it's hard to find it without Ophiuchus in it. So that tells you that, you know, why are they not putting together the whole serpent, and why isn't there enough information? Not even enough software to do the calculations when it comes to these kind of information about astrology. So let me talk a little bit about the Serpents constellation and that specific star, Unukalhai, which is located at 22 degrees of Scorpio when you look at the traditional astrology. I think is the first star, if you want to follow this research with us, if you want to see what you have around 22 degrees of Scorpio, I would say is the first star that we can integrate, because then it reminds us that it is out there in the Serpents constellation and you want to include it within your astrological chart. So I did the exercise. You can go to astro.com and you look for that star, or you just look at your chart and point it. So what is the importance of the Serpents constellation? First of all, that it is really close to the galactic center. The tail of it is very close to the galactic center. It's like is a channel of life and force and energy which connects us to the center of the galaxy. It's like giving us that nurturance. According to the mythology of the stellar nations as well, the origin of the male and female serpent is in Sirius A, and they never separate. They're always tied up the tail, the masculine and feminine ones, and they're part of that primordial egg. They came out of the primordial egg, and then they went separate ways.
Which is actually how we see them in the symbol of the caduceus in the staff. If we look at the bottom, the tails are always conjoined. So they're actually two aspects of the same being. Interesting, we can say.
So according to that story, the original codes, they're always tied at the tail so that they remain in unity. Even though they're living different experiences around the galaxy, they come back into unity at some point.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about the female manifestation of the goddess, which is connected to the serpent as well. It's an energy of creation. It's an energy of nurturing worlds, and the Milky Way is the result of all of that. It's a symbolism of fertility, is the entrance to heaven, and the female serpent energy is all connected to Tantra and healing and the hidden 13. And I think that is one of the reasons why it was removed from the astrology by the Babylonians, because then the world became more of a young world, more about wars and conquering and aggressiveness and all of the pyramidal
fixed reality,
and pyramidal, more material.
More material, right? Yeah.
So they removed that sacred feminine aspect of it. And we could see that there was the persecution of witches and the priestesses, the herbalist women, the wise women, the medicine women happened for a long time. But that is exactly what this star represents, the connection to nature, the healing through the natural, through the plants and through all of these.
Right. And, you know, again, looking back to the Stellar Nation story, which we highly recommend people to get into, and we'll share maybe a bit more about that at the end. You know, one of the things we learn is that the original protectors of the goddess energy of free will are the great felines, and through a series of events they kind of have to leave this galaxy, and they go into hiding, we can say, in the Andromeda galaxy. But in order for the goddess energy to remain in our realm, it kind of transfers from the great felines into the female serpents, and they then carry the energy of the goddess, but in these slightly different forms that had to, we can say, maybe transform themselves. They needed to be the essence of the serpent, to be a shapeshifter, to move around and even avoid being persecuted, because they were kind of essentially in hiding. So I feel like sometimes, Bella, that the energy of the goddess came into the female serpent form as a way of preserving the wisdom of the goddess, but in a different form that maybe was less easy to pin down, because that's what was necessary during the last couple, or maybe even 4 millennia, we can say.
Yeah, I think it's one of the versions of the sacred feminine that is very connected to the earth and to reproduction, to fertility, to connection to our own sexuality, and how then it became taboo. And then you see the religions where everybody is a priest or a masculine, you know, it went into a whole extreme. So the balance was lost, basically, by removing the feminine part, which is very represented by the Serpent's constellation. And in this case, I'm going to focus so much in Unukalhai. So Caput Serpens, I mentioned, is the head, and is lifted up, looking up. And then the tail is the one that is connected down to the center of the galaxy, where we kind of receive everything through our root chakra, basically. It's like raising our Kundalini from the center of the galaxy up. So you see that if we're not aware of this connection, we're not accessing that with full awareness.
Right, which is also part of our universal primordial energy, life force. And I think that if we really get completely disconnected from it, well, maybe then we'll be kaput and we'll be going across the other side of the veil. But we can say that, you know, even if we haven't got that really in our awareness, it's active to some level. But if we can really harness that energy through our vehicle, through our DNA, and by becoming more material. So in some ways we had to become more material in order for the energy of the DNA to start activating in a physical form. And if we look at the two strands of the DNA, again, it looks very much like the intertwining snake.
So it's like very close to the original organic template.
Right. And also we had a picture of Kulkulkan there, which really, you know, we can say that the serpents are the downstream version of the dragons who lost their feet and their wings because they're also reptiles. Well, you know, to me, this is how it looks, is, you know, the original primordial forces of the world were the elemental beings, the dragons. And really, snakes are serpents downstream, we can say, from granddaddy and grandmother dragon. So maybe what we're seeing is a more incarnated version of that energy, which is also, when we talk about the meridian lines of the body, we also talk about the dragon lines, which also is deeply connected to where the Kundalini energy flows. So again, we're not saying this is definitively this or that, we're just exploring different ideas. And as you can see, even we don't necessarily agree about everything, which is good, because it provokes more research. And so we're sharing all of this with you because we want to invite you into this particular journey with us in this story. So this is, as we're progressing, these are the things that are coming to us.
And I hope you found some interesting things connected to Ophiuchus and the serpents. And do share, what do you resonate with? What do you think is the way forward with integrating the 13 hidden sign? So to summarize this part about Unukalhai, it's the alpha star of the Serpent's constellation. It's part of the head, but it's represented in the stellar nations mythology as the heart of the snake. It's all to do with initiations. It's where we resolve emotional traumas. So we know the sun is coming close to the 22 degrees, so it will be in the next few weeks. So it's a good moment to go through the final initiations that you feel you need to do to resolve emotional traumas. It's also connected to healing physical diseases. So if you have issues with your body, it's a good moment to review and maybe connect with this wisdom. It's the perfect one connected to antidotes for poisons, just like Scorpio. So it works with antidotes, with homeopathy, herbalism, even massage for therapy. And it's also very connected to the energy of the 8th house of astrology, even the crossing of people, the psychopumping, or the veil being thinner. So all of this is part of this energy of Unukalhai. But more than anything is the wisdom, the healing wisdom that we can connect to. So if you have your sun, your moon, or any planets around there, and if you don't, at least know what it is so that we know we can connect to that energy.
Right, and Bella's just hit on something really important there, which I think is going to be coming up a lot in the coming days, weeks, and months as we round out 2024 and move into 25 and the great period of disclosure. We're going to be dealing a lot with the idea of poisons.
Yes.
Particularly snake poisons because of their role in the last 3 years, and I'm sure many of you know what we're talking about. But poisons in general, because one of the things we can say is that as beings, as humans, we have been systematically poisoned for a very, very long time, which I think is testament to just how resilient beings we actually are to resist all of these poisons, whether from our sky, our food, offered medications, etc., etc. It's pretty much everywhere, and we've managed to resist all of those things. So good for us. We're still here, we're still in the game, and we're still trying to make sense of it. But also an aspect of the female serpent is really about healing.
Yeah.
And we can also say that the master healers of poisons are the great scorpion spirits, because one of the most venomous poisons of all is that of the scorpion. It can give you the slow death if you don't know how to deal with it. So if you go into the Tibetan Buddhist realms, they talk a lot about poisons and how the yogis are able to drink a glass of poison, knowing that it's poison, and then to everyone's amazement, not be affected by it.
Yeah. And I also wanted to mention here that the serpent is one of the totems of Scorpio as well.
Right.
It's like the lower, the intuition, the underworld totem. Then it's the Scorpio. Then we go into the eagle and phoenix and the other ones, the higher notes.
So what does all of this mean? It means that really the energy of this period and this time of the year is one where we can really go through death and rebirth processes, but we can also dig deep into any poisons that may be in our system, any poisonous programs, any poisonous sports, any poisonous ways of being, but also any deep-rooted physical poisons. And the beauty of the snakes with the shedding of the skin is that they're alchemical. Even something that's in our body that might not be good for us can actually, with conscious intention and the right processes, internally be transformed into fuel, which I think is really, really important, because as we move forwards, we start to understand that things that have not aided us or really don't really serve us are actually a latent energy source for us to then expand into, which is really what the whole next period of human evolution is about. So nothing is wasted, nothing is bad, it's all useful, and we've got this really alchemical time of the year to look at these different ideas and actually start to understand not just how they're ideas, but how other traditions like Tibetan Buddhism and the yogis have shown how we can work with them for our own benefit. So I think that's all hugely exciting.
Yes, it is. So here I wanted to give you an example of the tropical or traditional astrology and how a chart with the sidereal and 13 signs astrology can look like. If you know of other softwares, we've been looking for different ideas with softwares for the sidereal one, which includes Ophiuchus or the Serpent's constellation. So here on the right, you can see the sign of Ophiuchus, and it's not specifically the Serpent's constellation. As I mentioned, it includes Ophiuchus. So what I'm trying to do with this exercise is for all of you to discern. You can go and do this exercise yourself. So what I did is just added Unulka High to the traditional astrology, which is at 22 degrees of Scorpio, and then also highlighted it here. Where is it located in the sidereal astrology as well? And so you can see that from about the 18th degree of Scorpio, the Serpent's constellation covers a really wide section. What I'm going to start doing is try to incorporate serpents rather than Ophiuchus. So there are many other stars. I will show you some others in the next slide that you can add to your chart and see which of those resonate or if you have planets on them. And so what is important about comparing the two astrological charts is that the tensions or the aspects of the planets remain pretty much the same. It's just that the houses change and the signs change, but you can see that you have the same aspects. So you can still talk about the same sextiles or the same oppositions or squares or whatever you're looking at when it comes to the planets. So that's an easier way or a middle ground to start merging the two of them. We will still feel the tensions or the oppositions or whatever, or the trines or the sextiles. So I'd say that that is the first step on how we can kind of connect these two dimensions, basically.
Right, and as we can see here, the size of the houses are different. Virgo is a very large house. Scorpio becomes very small because it shares the space with Ophiuchus. Even Cancer becomes a lot smaller. So it's very, very different. And as Bella said, we're taking one step at a time to try and understand how much does it fit. But, and as Bella also said, there are very few systems of software, certainly, that allow us to include a 13th sign of Ophiuchus, which may or may not be correct. Maybe the 13th sign is not necessarily Ophiuchus, but serpents. So there is a lot here to think about, but we want to explore these opportunities and show, first of all, that the position of the planets doesn't change. It's only how they relate to us, either down here on the ground or to perhaps our star selves. Maybe that's a way to start thinking about sidereal astrology, is it's connected to our star selves, and Western astrology is connected to our earthly selves. Of course, we exist in both places, so both have their use, which is to point us towards.
So the other part that we wanted to show here is the amount of stars that get activated in this period of the year, which is the 4 pillars of the Christ consciousness: Acru, Becru, Gacru, and Delta Crucis. And I also wanted to show the serpent. So all of these stars so connected to the Scorpio energy, it's the part that we want to explore a little bit more, right?
Yeah, there's quite a bit to contemplate. We're really bringing in, again, from the Stellar Nations pathway, we're bringing in a number of different aspects, particularly the male and female serpents, but also the Christ consciousness, and actually maybe a little bit later how that links to the winged lions, because it's all very much connected to the biblical times, of which we've already highlighted that the serpents are very much part of, as indeed is the Christ consciousness. So we are coming to that very, very important pivotal moment where even the end times in the biblical prophecies are also coming to pass, because they have to, and that's okay. How they come to pass and how we understand them is up to us, which is where we can all find our own truths within this by looking at the stars, looking at our DNA, how it's being expressed in our astrology and our cosmology, and making sense of it for ourselves, which is what we've been doing this week.
Which is what I love, because many people that are watching the videos are contributing actively as well to expanding our consciousness, and we're all creating the new system as a group, which is, to me, the way it should be.
Right.
So just to summarize, when it comes to the energy of the male serpent and female serpent, it's about healing and teaching. But we know that for thousands of years now, the male serpent energy, which became more of the lower nodes, with looking for power and dominance and ambition, versus what it could be, which is sharing knowledge and teaching and wisdom. So when we look at Ophiuchus, I think it's still resembling a little bit of that, of being the serpent bearer, a masculine aspect holding a serpent bearer. And I'm not into the woke stuff anyway, but I think there should be some neutrality when it comes to looking at the serpent, and it should be each one of us who activate that serpent and wisdom, because for the Greeks, it was the rod of Asclepius, again, another masculine figure in charge of what is the symbol of medicine. So I think we're now ready to come to a new point of balance where masculine and feminine are fully integrated, and so whoever bears the serpent is whoever you want to be, right? So some of the stars that I wanted to mention, which are part of the serpents constellation, are the Beta serpents, Delta Caput Serpentis, Yet Prior, Alia. So some of those you can look still in some of the softwares that you find around. And then there are other stars connected to Ophiuchus, like Morphic, Rasalhague, Han, Sabik. And Antares is also part of the female line of the Stellar Nations mythology, and it's all connected to what we were talking about with Unul-Kahai, medicine, tantra, healing. And when it comes to the male line, we have those very important stars, which are Alnilam, Alnitak, and Mintaka, which are part of the Orion constellation. And then Arcturus and Isar, which are part of the Boots constellation. And then there are a few like Eridanus and Sirius A. So if you're interested in any of these, you want to take these farther, we have the Stellar Nations pathway in our platform. If you want to research, there is a whole chapter about this information. if you want to go into the mythology around it and how to locate these stars and how to work with them and integrate these cosmic codes. But if not, you could just look at the astrology and look for some of those yourself and see how you connect to them.
Right. So on that note, you can get your Antares code, which is your kind of fixed star blueprint, which is based on your natal astrology chart. Again, you can find the links for that on our website. It takes you back to the originators of a lot of this material, Bayer and Nico in Hungary. But also, actually, what you can do is you can go into another software like on astro.com where they have a list of fixed stars, which is how we managed to get them on the chart. So we're just giving you a few here to look at. You can play around with it yourself. What we would suggest that generally a good orb of influence for a fixed star on your planets is normally around 2.5. Some of the bigger stars,
even less,
even less sometimes. And some of the bigger stars maybe that have a bigger influence, like Vega, Capella, Polaris, maybe they're up to 4 degrees, but it's not quite the same breadth of orb that you might give yourself in traditional astrology. So just bear that in mind. But you can find all of these tools relatively easily, and you can start having a look to see even just the ones that Bella's listed there, or you can go into the star map apps, which are also really cool, and you can see all of the different stars that are in the Serpent's constellation using those apps, and then go into an astrology program and find them on your chart. So a lot of this is about being self-empowered in many ways, and also putting the pieces together, which we're kind of, I guess, doing here too.
And I think, if anything, I want to invite you all to integrate the higher notes, the wisdom of the serpent energy on the masculine and feminine side, because we have that energy within ourselves. We had a reptilian brain, which is all connected to our more basic emotions, those of survival and reaction, or fleeing, or freezing. So we have that energy within ourselves, and we can work with it to elevate it to a higher octave and to a more expanded consciousness.
Right, and this is a beautiful picture here of a snake, and for many people, the snake brings up this kind of revulsion, as indeed does the scorpion energy, and and spiders also, which is also very much part of the this time of the year. These are kinds of beings that many people find difficult, that they have a revulsion or an aversion to. But as we realized when we were at a nature reserve recently, and we were talking to the tortoises, I was like, hey, actually, you know what? The head of the tortoise looks a bit like a snake, but it also looks a bit like a bird. Which then took us into thinking, oh my God, this is a bit like the feathered serpent, which includes bird, snake, and dragon. So I was like, wow, that's easier for me, because snakes can bring up this energy of like fear, even like it's going to bite me, it's going to poison me, and of course the scorpion too. But when you live in places like Mexico and scorpions drop into your bed while you're asleep, you kind of get used to the fact that actually they don't really want to sting you, and they're only going to do that if you somehow push their button. So I think that we'll
react with fear.
Right, exactly. React with fear by lashing out, which I think is a good metaphor for those of us about to experience something on this side of the pond. Let's not be like that.
Reactive.
Yeah, that being that reacts with fear and prompts a reaction from the other side to lash out and lash back, maybe even more strongly than we expected. So let's respect these beings for what they are and what they can offer, because on their higher notes they offer healing and they offer teaching. On their lower notes they offer the manipulation of those kinds of abilities.
And what I understand is, by keeping our serpent energy in balance is how we achieve the next level of enlightenment.
Yes.
Which is what we want to talk about.
Right.
Do you want to start there?
Well, yes. This has perhaps been a slightly more personal episode in some ways, just because it's our time of the year when we have our solar returns. But this year, we saw already a long time ago, regardless of whether our solar returns at this particular moment was going to be super powerful, because of the pivot that is about to happen here in the US anyway, which is going to have to play out some way. It doesn't really matter which side of the fence you sit on, or whether you're even neutral and not even really that interested. It is going to have an effect on things. And so it seemed interesting to us when we first met each other that our birthday sat literally equipresent sides of Samhain and All Souls Day, the 31st of October, and new moon. So me personally, this year, what was super interesting was that this symbol, the Star of David, was actually being mapped out in the astrology on my birthday, which then prompted us to go to a very interesting site, which we did already share a little bit in yesterday's video, a site here in Texas called Kerrville, where the eclipse cross passed back in October of last year of 2023 and April of this year in 24. And surprisingly, I guess we can say in some ways, it turns out that there was a whole sculpture garden with lots of the energy of the Christ consciousness embedded in the exact place where these two eclipses cross. So what better place to drop into our awareness the day before my birthday to go and visit with this idea of the Star of David being imprinted into the astrology, which Bella's going to show a little more clearly here on the astro chart for my birthday this year. So this got us thinking, because we'd already been looking at the serpents, and because we know that really the combination of the joining of the male and female serpent energy is the Yeshua and Magdalene energy, the Christ in consciousness, which we're going to look at in relation to where the sun is in the Gru constellation in a minute. It felt very, very appropriate. Now, full disclaimer, I've never been super religious. Hated church. Not Catholic, hated going to church as a kid, did have to go, did have to participate in.
Or Jewish.
Or Jewish. And I have to be honest, even though it's resonant of my own name and many other things from my own journeys actually make a lot of sense for me to do the six-pointed star, I'd always found this a difficult symbol to connect with for many reasons. I'm sure many of you will understand, particularly for how that star has been used, maybe we can say in different ways. And again, not going to get into religious division, just looking at this from the point of view of the energy of a six-pointed star. But what was really interesting,
which we cover in chapter 6,
right,
about all of the symbology of this six-pointed star and what does it really represent.
Right, so we can say in many ways that it represents the balanced energy of the male and female energy. That's what it represents in terms of a tone in a Mayan wave spell. Number 6 is about balance. So what was interesting for me personally when we went to this site, which was actually a really, really powerful site. It's not normally the sort of thing I'd want to go and do on my birthday, I have to be honest, but we were drawn there. We always follow our intuition, and lo and behold, it had many surprises, many personal things for me to consider. But what I thought was really interesting was, and you can just about see it on this symbol that is the Star of David, or the six-pointed star, is that a cross had been emblazoned into it with nails, literally in the shape of the crucifixion. And I then started to understand that this is really what had been done to the six-pointed star. It had been used as a way of overlaying the energy of the crucifixion, which is also a way of emasculating the masculine, which then doesn't allow the balance to happen between the male and female. And I'm sure with a little bit of thought, many of you can start to understand where this is going. So even if that wasn't necessarily the representation that was written about, that's immediately what came to me at the energetic level. And I was like, wow, this is how this has happened for the last 2,000 years, how the age of Pisces, that should have been about the higher notes of the serpent energy, has actually been much more about the lower notes of the serpent energy, because we can say this kind of magic that was used on the Star of David. So again, more thoughts, more magic, more esoteric stuff, but heck, you know what it is. So an energy, so why not? We're looking at a time when the veil is thin and trying to make sense of how these things have been allowed to happen, how we've allowed them to happen, or maybe how we had the veil pulled over our eyes so that we couldn't see them. So anyway, a little bit from me about the energy of the 28th and the Star of David.
So what I wanted to share about this is that the stars were showing us how the balance needs to be now integrated, the masculine and the feminine. And I see that with Unul-Kahai conjunct Mercury, which is part of that triangle, that trine that formed here. And then we have the other one that, thanks to the moon being there, momentarily during that day formed this amazing grand trine or grand sextile exactly on that day. So to me, that is a symbolism of, okay, let's talk about the Serpent's constellation. We need to incorporate it because it's the union of the masculine and feminine energy that actually take us to the next level.
Right, and one of the other things, maybe just to add into this, Bella, is that when we were at this symbol and this site, one of the things that came through to me really strongly was the idea of a seal, an energetic seal. And what can happen when an energetic seal is basically got a circuit breaker inserted into it and it gets caught in a loop. And I think that this symbol, perhaps more than some of the other ones, has that idea of a circuit already embedded into the energy of balance. And when you put a circuit breaker like the cross there with the nails on one side of it, you actually create this kind of hamster wheel effect that is very difficult to break.
So more than anything, I think it's a symbolism of a big frequency shift for the planet. And it happens just days before elections in the US, just as many things are about to happen, just as the solar flares have intensified and there are more X flares and geomagnetic storms. So I do see it as a gateway, the first entrance to the next part of this process.
Right, and also, as much as there was a Star of David, the other thing I think is worth mentioning is that there was a six-sided hexagon being formed with the sextiles that were in place. And so
so you form it like this.
Yeah, you can see that really clearly with those. And then it comes to the point which is not mapped out here. So you could take in this particular chart, you could take the 22 degrees of Mercury, which is a little wide in comparison to Pluto, or you could introduce our good old friend Hidalgo, who's just crossed over from the 29th degree of Mercury into Capricorn at this point, and that forms a sextile because it's actually very, very close. It's within minutes of being a direct sextile with Pluto at 29:43 of Capricorn. So there is also that beautiful series of sextiles, each one cascading into the other, creating this beautiful harmonious effect, which is, I guess, another aspect of the six-sided star. So it's the same 6 points, but formed in two different ways, but both happening on this day.
And also the activation of the first two pillars of the Christ consciousness.
So this is where we start to blend from the serpent beings into the Christed consciousness beings. And here, perhaps, this is my opinion, we're looking at perhaps two of the greatest archetypes of the male serpent and the female serpent. Just my opinion, maybe you might not agree, but when we look at teacher and healer, I think they're being embodied right here in this image.
Right. And so the two stars that got activated that day were Gakru, which is all to do with divine mercy and redemption, and Delta Crucis at 5 degrees of Scorpio, which is about divine will.
Right. So for all of you out there in Scorpio season who have your solar returns within a couple of degrees of 5 or 6 degrees of Scorpio, that means that somehow in your soul, you're also carrying these first two pillars of the Crew constellation, which together as the four pillars create the sacred temple of the Christed consciousness, which is not gender specific, of course, but is actually the beautiful harmony and balance of these two energies.
So surprise, surprise, on your birthday, we open with those two. And now on my birthday, we're going to activate at 11 degrees of Scorpio, Akru and Bekru, which is all to do with divine love and divine law.
Right.
And here we have, so we have the two charts, not so much because we want to show what our birthday is or anything like that, but to see the geometry, to see the activations, and to see how the astrology is actually showing us what is to come in this big portal. Right. We know that the 3rd of November is the second day of the wave spell, is the storm day on a day of challenges and obstacles, meaning that things are bound to happen, triggers are bound to be out there just days before the election time as well.
Right, and as Bella said, this is really not about showing the birth charts of our birthdays, but more about showing how the energy of our birthdays, our solar returns, has prompted this whole line of investigation, really inwards into ourselves, but also to see at the micro and macro, the mirror level, as we can say, how is what's going on for us at a personal level may be reflective of our history, our society, even our global culture. And this is something we can all do for any solar returns, but we're just doing it this time of year because it's one that resonates deeply with us. But of course, many of you out there watching us and have been following us for a while already have very strong Scorpio energy, as you've shared. And if it is your birthday during Scorpio season, happy birthday, everybody. Please do. Happy solar returns. Please do put that in the comments below so we can wish you a personal happy birthday.
Sure the majority of people are, you know.
Well, we've taken a pulse in our own tribe in PPW, and yes, we know that there are many Scorpio sun beings and Scorpio rising beings and Scorpio moon beings, and we know that many of you out there also have very prominent positions on these places in the first half of the Scorpio sign. So we know that this is also relevant for many of you, and it's a really interesting story to share anyway.
And let's remember, we all have all of these energies. Yeah. In fact, there are so many more constellations out there that we should include. And so they say there are 88 that we should be included or paying attention to. We're saying instead of 12, there should be at least 13. At least know where the Serpent's constellation falls in your chart, and at least identify Unulkahai, which is here at 22 of Scorpio. What house is it affecting in your life? Are you connected to the healing qualities of it, to the plant medicine, and all of the other qualities that we mentioned earlier on? So I think we're going to start wrapping up the astrology, just to say that on November the 1st, which is today, when we're recording, there is the new moon where we want to put all of our intentions, these new beginnings. What do you want to do moving forward? It seems like a big portal is opening here from the 28th of October, but we can put our intentions, our seeds here in the middle of these two gateways, so that we can see the fruits later on. And so what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to transform of yourself? Have you been looking at the shadows? What else can we change and transform or alchemize at this point?
Right, and we were looking at the six-sided hexagram on the 28th of October, and it looks like it's somewhat disappeared by the 3rd of November, but actually it's still there. It just depends where we're taking our references from, because if we include Vesta and we include Hidalgo, we still have that cascading effect. The influences are slightly different because we have Vesta, the sacred flame, which I think is very connected to divine feminine, but then we also have, again, our warrior priest friend, Hidalgo, who went under the banner of Our Lady of Guadalupe, another aspect of the goddess. And so we can see that the energy is still present. It's changing, bringing in different aspects, all of which we can track, because these planets are all going to be in the same position regardless of which astrological system we're using. So this is where we can have a look into the details of things like these star charts and start to make sense of a much bigger motif that is a choice that we can work with. And I really want to say, again, for me, the serpents offer us the idea of choice, an ambivalent choice. It's up to you which one you choose. It could be this, could be that, could be good, could be bad, could be light, could be dark. We're not making any distinction about that. That's up to you to do. But here it is, the choice. And I think that that is a very, very powerful motif to take forward in this moment with so much division in the world, because ultimately we want to be much more non-dual about all of this and say, hey, we can have a difference of opinion. That's actually good. It's stimulating. But if it gets to be something that then is not serving either of us who are having a debate or a discussion, we can say, then maybe it's time to have a look at what's going on there. And are we too attached to our belief systems and viewpoints?
And let's remember that November 3rd, day 2, which is a storm day in the wavespell, the storm is a catalyzer. And the big catalyzer that all of the astrologers out there are talking about, it's the Mars opposition to Pluto, which are also two planets connected to Scorpio. So we see here the catalyzing effect coming through the energy of Scorpio as well, is what I can see. And there are lower nodes to this opposition, but what I'm also seeing here is a connection of Mercury to this opposition, saying, hey, there are ways to transcend this through communication, through, in chapter 2, I talk a lot, how can we transcend polarity, especially, because there are tools that we can use, and it's all through communication, I think.
Right, and of course, I talked about Hidalgo a lot. It's an energy that I feel very resonant. Myself and Kelly Hunter did a wonderful deep dive on that asteroid 944, which is on our QPW platform and also here on YouTube. But again, we can see that Mercury is conjunct Hidalgo on November the 3rd. So it's like, what is the message of the warrior priest that wants to be communicated? It's the warrior male priest under the banner of the healing female imperative. And under that conjoined banner, Hidalgo was able to raise, we can say, an army, a rebellion of all types of beings, both Caucasians and indigenous Mexican people, and they fought together for something that they believed, which was freedom, which I think is super interesting, considering that November the 5th is also a day, particularly in Britain, that's linked to Guy Fawkes, which was about blowing up the system. So without wanting to incite anything here particularly, all we're doing is pointing to some energies of this time of year. And I've often wondered why that whole gunpowder plot was in the middle of Scorpio season. Anyway, food for thought. Please share your thoughts and comments below. And please also hit like and subscribe as we continue our ongoing adventure against the YouTube algorithmic systems. Thank you, everybody.
So we do feel that it's a very intense period of time, but it's the one that is going to catalyze the big change that we're going to start seeing in the world now. And what we invite everybody to do is to try to remain calm, to use all of the tools that you've been learning. We've done so many immersions. We have a bunch of courses, some things that we have tried to share so that you have in your own, you have probably integrated by now. So you have plans to work with, astrology to work with, galactic codes, the Mayan time and magic. So there are many tools to be able to navigate this period, the navigation guide to quantum consciousness. So I'm sure that you also have all the tools that you can come and integrate meditation, yoga, and many other things that are going to be so useful at this point when people are starting to see the collapse.
Well, just to share something, over the years of being a teacher and a spiritual person in various different countries across the world, I've often come across many people, and I would put myself in the same category for a long time, of wanting to be connected to my star. So I had absolutely no clue about how to make that happen. And it would often, in the early days, flip between sort of meditational visions and maybe imaginational spaces, and I'm not really sure of too much at all. Merely only having a strong connection to dragons and angels. However, through the deep diving into astrology and then into the fixed star cosmology, particularly through the archetypal pathway, the stellar nations, but then also adding the Mayan glyph essence has really allowed me to go inside and activate fully all of these different archetypal aspects of me, which are actually encoded and embedded into my DNA, which of course is where the work of a wonderful master geneticist plant like Dandelion comes in, who teaches us not only about how to fix our DNA, but also about the nature of time. Really, if you needed one being to assist you in the ascension process, it is Dandelion, which is why we called him the architect of a 5D new way of being, because really he's going to help you get there. So always recommend taking Dandelion. It's not the plant of this particular episode because it could be the plant of every episode. So we're going to introduce a different one. But yeah, Dandelion is always a plant that can help us connect to all of ourselves. And of course, we have to give some energy, right, Bella, to investigating these aspects of ourselves. And that's why we have astrology and cosmology to help point us in the right direction. Because when we start to map these things out, we start to find all kinds of correspondences, all kinds of internal stories and jump off points, timeline convergence points in our own lives in this incarnation that speak to us of another part of ourselves having a different experience somewhere else, maybe in the past, maybe in the future, which is really all happening now.
Okay, so
yeah. Back in the room.
So Mars and Pluto, which are in opposition, I think are really telling us is that point in evolution where something's going to break, big transformation, more of the matriarchal or mother feminine energy and patriarchal masculine energy here in Capricorn on the last degrees. And so this tension is going to happen again in January and again in April, but Mars is going to be in a different position. Well, it is going to retrograde back. So what is this big tension moment telling us just about Pluto, just as Pluto is about to leave Capricorn? So we're going to have these 3 moments of tension that we need to pay attention to within ourselves, and then be able to be in our hearts when we see everybody reacting around that, and try to bring some calm, some heart, some maturity and responsibility and integration of all of the tools that we've been talking about and that you can even share with us here.
Right, and as Bella said, these two planets, Mars and Pluto, are the old and new rulers of Scorpio, and I think there's an interesting dynamic there, and also the fact that Mars is just literally edged over into the very, we can say, Christ consciousness related sign of Leo, to do with alliance, to do with royalty, to do with true kingship, all of these ideas. But it's going to then retrograde, so it's going to be bouncing backwards and forward a bit between Leo and Cancer, which are quite different energies. And also Mars is very much the upstart. It's got a new way of doing things. It's like, hey, I've got lots of energy, lots of vim and vigor. My serpent energy is fully maxed out and I'm ready to go with it. Pluto's like, well, yeah, that's all great, but you don't know everything that I know because I've been out here at the perimeters a much longer time than you have any idea about, and I know a lot more than you. So I'm not sure that your impetuousness is exactly the way that we need to do this. And so we can see that even though these are both connected to Scorpio, they're actually quite different energies of Scorpio. One is the endless search for the truth, and the other one is the perhaps more dynamic kinetic energy of the serpent in full flow, which is Mars.
Yes. Mars would be more of that serpent energy on the male side, more ego-based, right, more like human self.
Yes.
While the Pluto would be more of the higher consciousness, the higher octave, what needs to happen here, the longer game. Yeah.
Yeah, which is perhaps why Mars often gets itself into trouble. It's the god of war, probably because people make rash decisions. Pluto, on the other hand, is like, well, that's maybe not the best way to go. And maybe when you're a bit older and more mature like me, you might not feel so compelled to act so rashly, because Mars can be a little rash sometimes, I think.
And with so much intense energy happening in the next few days, I think this is an amazing plan to work with so that we can finish our shadow work and remove some of the imprints and trauma and PTSD. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, so this is a plan that we've talked about a lot. We've never done an immersion on this. I personally believe that this is a plan with incredible technology that's going to assist us in the future. It's not one that you'll generally find in most herbalist apothecary unless they specifically work with this plant. So I've given a couple of names here. It's sometimes called rosebay willow herb, particularly here in the US, or back in Britain, it's called fireweed. Grows very prolifically, particularly in the land of the dragons, interestingly, in Wales, and it goes by the Latin name of Caminarium angustifolium. So I've done a search. It's not the easiest necessarily to find in the US. In the UK, you can get it from most apothecary stores, and there are quite a few essence suppliers. Here in the US, I have also located online, just with a fairly quick search, a number of essence suppliers. So this is a medicine that you can get. It's a little bit more difficult to find than some other plants maybe, but it is still out there. So definitely worth doing a bit of research. But why have we included that or this plant this time? So, well, this is a plant that we work with all the time in our healing practice, in our astral clearing sessions. This is the plant that we get to help remove imprints of trauma. So often with a trauma, there is an original incident that somehow then also has the unfortunate effect of maybe getting an attachment or other energy clustered or crystallized around it, which then doesn't really allow the trauma to get fully illuminated and healed. Well, once the obstructing factors have been removed and the necessary trauma has been brought into the light, what can happen sometimes is that there may be some latent levels of PTSD energetically that are still in the field. So what I've observed, Bella, over the last few years of doing clearing work, both on myself and on others, is that yes, everything can be removed, and at the surface, everything looks shiny and great. But with a little bit of poking underneath the surface of even of an energy field, you can see that there are still other layers of trauma that haven't really been fully released or expressed, which then do, on a much lesser level, but it's still there, run the risk of attracting those energies back into our lives. So there's still, we can say, a subsurface level of healing that can happen, and this plant is here to help us with that in so many different ways. Do you have anything you wish to say at this point?
No, I was trying to pronounce Caminarium angustifolium.
It's a bit of a tongue twister, which is why we just call it fireweed. It's a lot easier. This is a plant that's actually been used a lot by the First Nations people of North America. It's been used a lot by traditional herbalists all over the world, but it's a little bit of a hidden gem. It's really interestingly a plant that is often used for, we can say, colonial energies. I'm just trying to think of the right word. In the physical form, it can be used for candida. This is a plant that's used for candida growth, which is actually a kind of a colonizing, we can say, yeast intelligence or something. So this plant is actually one that's normally subscribed for that issue in the physical body, but we can also understand by retroengineering the energetic effects in the physical body back to the intelligence level that this is a plant that can help us clear traumas of colonialism. Either
way of the spectrum you have experiences. And remember that when we look at different timelines, we have been victims and we have been perpetrators. If you're capable of looking into different timelines, you'll see that we've been playing both sides many times. So whatever it's still there as a trauma, whether you were a victim or a perpetrator, you can still go and work with this plant to help you transcend and alchemize and remove these imprints.
Right, and as we move forwards into the Aquarian age, all of us really have mixed DNA, mixed lineage backgrounds, mixed blood, etc., etc. So we need to be getting past this idea of victim and perpetrator. In the colonial expression, it is something that we've all experienced, we've all participated in various ways, as Bella's just said. Maybe we need to let it go now. So I think this is a plant that's going to help us integrate, again, our DNA, our ancestral lineages, our off-planet lineages, all of these things we've just been talking about. And because of that, this is a plant that's going to help us deal with depression and anxiety, maybe about some of these insurmountable things that have been coming up in our life. But we can share from doing the astral clearing sessions. We've also said in the energy updates that many people have been feeling depression, feeling anxious, feeling futility, even maybe going to further extremes of those energies. And part of that is that so much of the energy of now is chaotic. And one of the things about this beautiful plant is that it has these huge seed heads, which actually with a little bit of wind get blown to the four winds. And this is why it's called fireweed, because when there is a fire on the mountain, which sometimes the mountain needs to have a fire and needs to reset and start again, certainly in Britain, one of the first plants that will grow back is fireweed. Why? Because it has this incredibly abundant seed head that just blows everywhere. Now, some people might say, oh, that then becomes an invasive plant. Well, not really. Not if this plant is offering something to the soil that actually promotes new growth after a resetting. So this plant is really good at helping us not get blown from pillar to post, like the seed heads do. That's part of its kind of medicine, but also understanding that in the tumultuousness of this kind of chaotic energy, that when the seeds finally settle on the ground, they're going to promote something new, which I think is a really good analogy.
I think it's going to be very useful maybe to get this plant if we can. In fact, if you have some of these tinctures or essences, do let us know in the notes, because many people keep on looking for it. It doesn't seem too easy to find it. But to say that we're in the year of the storm, and the storm is here to catalyze the big transformation for the planet that we are due. So it's going to carry on until July of 2025. We see with the oppositions of Mars and Pluto that this game is going to go on for the next 3 to 6 months. So we want to be able to have tools to deal with things, to come to a place of calm, and even help the people around us.
Right.
Good. So just a reminder of the navigation guide to quantum consciousness. The whole 13 chapters have been completed and they are in our platform. Super excited and happy with the feedback.
Right, and actually, you know, as this is rolled out, this episode on the 13th day of this chapter being released is literally our last day of completing this energetic process ourselves, which is why we're super excited to be putting this episode out with that energy, with the new moon in Scorpion, all the things that we've shared. And yes, it has been a little bit personal this episode, but thank you for listening, everybody. And hopefully you've understood what it was you were sharing. It's not really about us, but about the much bigger picture, but we've seen it through our own lens and filter.
So one of the advices from Zach for us, and I think for the people that follow us, is for the next 2 to 3 months to be more in a hibernation mode and learn, do your projects, your planning and everything else, because there is going to be too much chaos out there. So this is something wonderful that I recommend if you want to get into the tools to quantum consciousness and the shortcuts through the dimensions for an expanded consciousness. Those 13 chapters are, I think, the best thing to do within the next 2 to 3 months.
Right, and also to assist in this process of encouraging those of you who are hearing what we're saying, wondering where can I put my energy next, we're also having a flash sale just up until November the 5th on our website, which includes the Mind, Time and Magic course, the Sacred Art of Geomancy, the Stellar Nations Pathway, and the Path of the Jaguar, with as much as up to 50% off. Now, we're doing this, A, because we think the material is important, B, to encourage all of you to step into the place of learning, and probably because the next 2 to 3 months could be a time when perhaps giving yourself a new focus could be useful. So all of those special offers are in the show notes below, but we also talked about them more in the Astral Update yesterday. And I guess the final thing to share, Bella, is this, right?
Yeah, so we're coming to the end of the 10 clearings we intended to do over this period of time, knowing that Pluto was going to exit Capricorn very soon. So we have 3 more clearings to do. And if you're interested in coming to one of the 3 remaining clearings, we have still space. We have some spots available. And if you want to purchase all of the teachings of these 10 sessions, you can also do so. The information is on the platform.
It is, and normally these sessions take place on a Sunday morning here in Texas. However, due to solar returns this week, this weekend session will be taking place tomorrow on Saturday at 11 a.m. Central Time, Texas. Please bear in mind that the clocks are changing on Sunday, and I think they've already changed in Europe, so that should be okay. And yeah, just again want to say a huge thank you, Bella, to everyone who has made it this far in today's video, but also who's participated in the astral clearing sessions, because we're seeing that as they've gone through each week, we've learned so much. They've inspired us to start doing this digging to understand what is it that wants to come through, because every week through the sharings that are reflected by the group, we also get to learn a lot, and we also get shown where to put our energies next. And as we've been moving through this, we've been shown to start letting go of the past, perhaps not focus so much on the need to clear, but also as Zach has shared with us, start receiving more light. So that's what we talk about.
He gave us new tools as well, so
yeah,
very interesting.
He gave us some new magic. Right,
so we've been doing a lot of clearing of the astrals and even connecting to the elementals of the earth, and the next part of the clearing is the next 3 sessions, which are going to wrap up this big cycle, I think, of Pluto in Capricorn and getting us ready for the next part of the journey.
Right, so thank you everybody for joining today. Hopefully you found this as interesting and stimulating to listen to as we found it putting it together. Lots to really still put into the jigsaw from all of us. That's another beautiful aspect of our weekly astral clearing sessions, that there's like we're all making the jigsaw together because we are in Lakesh. We are all another you. And with that in mind, thank you everybody for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. And to remind you that now that we're settled down for a few months, as recommended by SAG, we are now opening our schedule to see some people and have sessions one-to-one. So if you want more information, it's all on the website.
Right, yeah, the notes below, activating the grail within is a special combo package of me and Bella putting our male and female serpent energies together in a way that's harmonious for our healing and teaching skills into something that can help you as the individual to kick on. So it's really a clearing, healing, and activation and empowerment package. So again, you can find the details below, activating the grail within. So I think that's it for this week. Yeah, please always feel free to comment or send us messages. We love to get feedback because it helps us shape the next shows coming in. So thank you again, everybody.
So the mirror is reminding us, I am another yourself in Lakesh. Let's pay attention over the next 13 days. What is the mirror trying to show us?
In Lakesh, everybody.
In Lakesh.